We are keeping on rolling with our prospect profiles here at Locked On Blue Jackets, as today we talk about a OHL prospect who could be a sneaky good depth pickup for the Blue Jackets. We're talking to Jared Brown of Draft Pro Hockey, all about Quentin Musty.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello and welcome to Locked On Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am, as always, your host, Jay Foster, here to bring you news, stories, the good, the bad, and the ugly about your favorite team and mine, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get started, I want to thank everyone for making this your first listen of the day every day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms. We are over on YouTube. If you haven't hit subscribe over there, please feel free to do so. We are creeping closer and closer to the next milestone, which is very exciting for me personally. And if you hit the bell button down below, then you'll get notified when new episodes go live. Today, we are talking all about Quentin Musty in the OHL. The Blue Jackets have that second first-round pick, and so I thought, hey, let's take a look at some of the players that they could potentially pick up. And I settled on this guy, who is small and fun, and maybe could be a good Blue Jacket. We talked to Jared Brown of Draft Pro Hockey about that exact thing, and he is much smarter than I am, so I'm just going to get right into it. With injuries to the Blue Jackets racking up, it looks like they're not going to be winning a ton of games down the stretch here, but good news, the draft is just around the corner. Hopefully the Blue Jackets can lock up at least a top 3 pick, but they do have a second first-round pick to play with, so I thought I would take a look at some of the more depth first-round pieces. I've got Jared Brown of Draft Pro Hockey here, and today we're going to talk all about Quentin Musty from the Sudbury Wolves. So thank you for coming on today, Jared. I guess let's start off with when Musty gets on the ice, what should fans expect to see from him? What kind of player is he?
Yeah, well, first of all, thanks for having me back on. With Musty, he's been a kind of a polarizing player for most of the year, dating back to his Hlinka Gretzky tournament. But the biggest thing that anyone will notice every time he steps foot on the ice is just his incredibly high skill level and his playmaking abilities. I mean, he's definitely probably in the top five, seven playmakers in this draft. I can definitely get on board with people that have him in their top five for playmakers because he just has an ability to kind of pull defenders towards him, open up lanes, or just slide slit passes through scenes that just not a lot of other like players just wouldn't be able to do. So he's got that, that skill and that ability to kind of generate a lot of chances. And that also makes him a very key power play specialist. I mean, he's got a terrific shot. He doesn't utilize it a ton because he likes to set his teammates up more. But, when you have a guy who's 6'3" or 6'2" and over 200 pounds, whatever he's at, you expect, a big power forward kind of player. But you're getting more of a guy who's just extremely skilled, can create a lot of plays on the ice, and can just be a difference maker in the offensive zone.
Yeah, for sure. Would you consider him kind of I guess polarizing is the word? I'm looking at the kind of the
Mm-hmm.
consolidated rankings on Elite Prospect, and he's ranked anywhere from 11th all the way up to 44th.
Yeah,
So that feels like a big range, especially in this draft. Is
yeah.
that
Well,
expected or?
yeah. Well, what's funny is I think our ranking of him at Draft Pro probably drops his consensus because we have him as a around an early second rounder. He's getting bumped up a little bit because I have seen him play twice now in the last month and a half, and his play has been better as of late. But he is definitely a polarizing player. And a part of that is because of multiple reasons. One, his skating is just okay for the NHL level. Like he will be an average skater. His first step isn't as explosive, so there are some concerns of his quickness. Once he gets going in transition, he can definitely make his way through the neutral zone. He can establish the zone, and he can create plays off the rush. That is, he can definitely do that. But his first step out of a stop and start, that is one area that I think scouts are looking at. Like he will definitely need to improve on. The other issue is he can go through lapses of inconsistencies with his play without the puck. And going back to, a guy who's 6'3", 205, you want him to be that, if he's not doing it offensively, maybe you want him to crash and bang. You want him to play that heavy style along the board, kind of win pucks for his team. But that is actually an area that I need to see him do more of, is winning more board battles, using his strength to his advantage in those scenarios. So, he's got the tools. It's just about learning to utilize those tools to become a more effective player in those battles, and just bringing a consistent effort and a consistent game and every shift. And that's something that, he hasn't done as much, I think, at least in my viewings, but it's hard to pass up the talent. I've talked to a few NHL scouts, and they say it's like, you got a guy who's six, with his size and his skill, that's a first round talent every day. And you may look past those red flags, like the average skating, or the lack of consistency and work ethic at times. You'll look past that because of his skill and size combination. So it's all about which scout you talk to, honestly. And I think that's why his consensus ranking, I mean, it's all over the place right now.
Yeah, I feel like it really depends on whether a team kind of has the faith in their own development process. I
Yeah.
guess, like, I feel like there's teams out there that want more sure things as opposed to more projects. And I feel like the Blue Jackets typically are a team that kind of pick guys that are super high skill and they
Mm-hmm.
work on their deficits. Like I'm thinking specifically of, for example, Kent Johnson,
Mm-hmm.
who has incredible skill, like such a high skill level, and when his feet catch up to his hands, like he's gonna be a game changer. And I'm wondering if it's kind of a similar situation with Musty of
Mm-hmm.
this is all fixable stuff. This is stuff that a team could maybe take a chance on, and then 2-3 years down the line, they're like, man, how did this kid drop to 24th, 26th, or wherever it
Yeah.
is he ends up going?
Yeah, well, Kent Johnson scored one of the goals of the year recently. I mean, that was unreal.
He sure did.
I was surprised to find out that he was the first Michigan Wolverine player to score the Michigan in the NHL. I think I read that, which was kind of cool to see. But yeah, I mean, I think Musty is, kind of in a similar boat like Kent Johnson. Now, I think, those areas that he needs to improve on. One, the skating can, a good development team can definitely work on skating. And, there's always the talk when, these kids are, 18, some of them are 17 when they get drafted because they have, birthdays before September 15th. But they're still growing into their bodies. And I'm not sure on the top of my head, but I think Musty has a birthday in the summertime. So he's still
Yes.
yeah, he's not an early birthday. Yeah. So he's still growing into his body. Like it's completely reasonable to believe that he could still grow, and he's, still getting used to his skating. There's a lot of players that have to do that. So with the right development team, his skating can be fixed. The work ethic, and, I never like to question one's attitude unless I know the player, obviously personally, so I won't question his attitude. But I think the work ethic at times, that, those the lapses of work ethic that I alluded to earlier, for me, those can be fixed, but the player has to be willing to fix that. And that's where you get into the more, you interview the player, and you will really get to know more about the player, know about what he's about on and off the ice in practice. And if he's dedicated to working hard at practice, off the ice, to improve the areas he needs to improve on, and, then work ethic should improve. But that is all on the player.
In a minute, we're going to talk to Jared more about Quentin, what he needs to work on, when he could potentially make the jump to the pros. But first, I've got to tell you all about FanDuel because it's the number one sportsbook in America. If you're not on FanDuel, you should be. It's super easy to use, even for people like me who don't really do a gamble every now and again. I found FanDuel super intuitive, especially the app. It's safe, it's secure. They are giving new customers right now a no sweat first bet up to $1,000. That's $1,000 back in bonus bets if your first bet doesn't win. So if you want to put some money on the Blue Jackets winning the draft lottery, let's say, and they don't do that, then you will get that money back up to $1,000 to bet with again. So don't miss your shot at a no sweat first bet up to $1,000 when you join FanDuel today. Just go to fanduel.com/locked on to sign up. Make every moment more with FanDuel. Yeah, definitely. In terms of, so we talked a little bit about how your kind of scouting network has him as a like an early first rounder.
Yeah.
Is that something like, do you anticipate that changing? Like, obviously, you've said that the last couple of times you've watched him, he's kind of gone up. Do you expect him to kind of keep rising up your personal board or up draft boards in general?
I think I've already raised him, enough for me, unless he's got a very big playoff series coming up against a stacked Peterborough Petes lineup that has a ton of NHL affiliated prospects. So if he can, bring a lot of kind of more playoff style hockey, and if he can be a difference maker for Sudbury in that playoff series against a really tough and a very physical Peterborough Petes team, then he could bump himself up to, he could get up to the 20 range. Right now, I have him on my board. I have him around 34 to 40 ish. And I have him below another OHLer in Carson Rakoff. I have Carson Rakoff higher than him. Yeah, I mean, a playoff series can do wonders for a prospect's draft stock. And so I'll be paying attention to see how he handles the heavy physical game. I think I've brought up his size maybe 4 times now, but he's got the size to be able to play a physical game, to be able to withstand contact, but he's got to make sure he controls the puck when he's taking contact in the corners and he's making a play, or he's first into the battle and he can fish the puck out and he can win that battle. So that's what I'll be watching from him against a very physical Pete's team. But if he's just okay though, if I say he was all right, he wasn't a difference maker, but he wasn't a liability, I'll probably keep him where I have him ranked anyways.
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like, especially we talked about earlier about like 17, 18-year-olds, I feel like they are still kind of figuring out how to move in this body that is, 6'2", 210 pounds or whatever. Like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's a little bit, Bambi, like deer learning to walk on ice,
Yeah.
But it's interesting that you say that about the playoffs, because I feel like there's a lot of talk about how you can't change not that you can't, but there's a lot of talk about players having good World Junior tournaments, for example.
Mm-hmm.
And some people are like, well, he was incredible on the international stage, so I'm going to bump him up. Or he had a
Mm-hmm.
bad World Junior, so I'm going to push him down the boards. How do the OHL, or I guess the CHL playoffs, kind of weigh into where a player should be drafted? Because I feel like there's a lot of weight put on playoff hockey that maybe not shouldn't be, but I don't know that I would say, oh, if a player is quiet in the regular season and turns it on in the playoffs, that is worth him getting bumped up to the next round. But I don't know what your kind of consensus is for that.
Yeah, so no, it's a great question because a lot of scouts are different. I think there are some scouts that will value playoff hockey or international competition extremely highly, and if they do prove that if they have a great showing in a 5-7 game stint, like you said, some scouts will bump them up. Now, is that warranted? It depends. If you look at international hockey, I looked at an example of a Quentin Byfield was an example. He played at the World Juniors for Team Canada, and he had I think it was a 4 or 5 point game, but it was against one of those bottom teams. Like it may have been against Latvia or Austria. So when I look at that, I'm like, okay, it was good and all, but can he do that against Sweden? Can he do that against USA, Finland, the harder teams to play against, the teams that, there's not that much space out there? And when it comes down to the playoffs, the space is limited. The space definitely gets limited. Now, CHL playoffs, NHL playoffs, big difference, obviously. And with the CHL playoffs, it's not like the ice shrinks a ton as it does in the NHL playoffs. That's not the case. But I do think there is some value to look at how they perform or the energy they can really bring. Some players can flip that switch, some players can't. And I think the players that can flip the switch and provide a role that is maybe a little bit different. If they were just like a skilled power play specialist in the regular season, but now with everyone healthy, they've kind of moved down the lineup. Maybe they're playing third line for their junior team. They're going to be used more in a checking role. So I think it's an opportunity for them to show that they can also supply that kind of, play style. They can play a checking role. They can be physical. They can bring energy, because that's, a lot of these kids in junior, they're star, they could be the star players for their team, but it's probably about 2% of the players will be star players in the NHL. A lot of those players turn out to be bottom six depth role players that have to change their game. So can you show that you can change that game already at the junior level when you are 18, 19 years old? I think that is worth some value. Is it enough value, though, to bump you up an entire ranking? Unless you have an amazing playoff run, then yes. But one round, maybe I'd bump you up 10 spots, 15 spots, maybe. But that wouldn't be enough for like a 32 spot jump into, late third rounder to a mid second rounder. It would be really hard for me to, do that. And also it'd be, maybe I just didn't watch that player enough in the regular season then.
Yeah, for sure. And I feel like there's always going to be some players that kind of slip through the cracks for scouts. Like every year, and I tell this story, I tell this on the podcast all the time, is every year I'm like, I'm going to get into prospects this year. I'm going to pay more attention to prospects. And then I realize just how many prospects there are, like you can't give the same amount of attention to every single prospect. So like, it makes sense that some guys are just like, well, I can only watch them a handful of times a season because there's only so many hours in the day,
Oh, exactly. Yeah.
But I want to just kind of finish off with, I've been looking a lot at centers in this kind of prospect profile series that I've been doing, because that's what the Blue Jackets need. At the minute, their top four wingers, in my opinion, are Johnny Gaudreau, Patrick Laine, who's unfortunately out injured at the minute, but I still feel like is top four even with that. Kent Johnson's been playing on the wing most of the season, and Kirill Marchenko continues to have just a phenomenal rookie season. 19 goals, 13 assists. It's very funny. But is Musty a guy that can knock one of those guys out of their top four wing spots? Is he a guy that you think has that kind of top six potential, or is he a guy that is ultimately probably going to be a depth piece behind guys like Gaudreau, Laine, Marchenko, Johnson?
He's not as skilled as Kent Johnson, but I think he is more skilled than Marchenko. He doesn't have the goal scoring ability as Marchenko. But I would say he would have the potential to leapfrog Marchenko. Ken Johnson would be very hard. My worry with Musty is he a top six player in the NHL and that's it? Can he be a bottom six player? Because of, again, those work ethics issues that I kind of alluded to. Like for me, I look at, a player that has had the tools and the skills to put it together, but has not done it consistently enough at the NHL level, and that's Kasperi Kapanen. And he was a former first rounder, and he's terrific straight line skater. He's got a good shot. He's got he's got a little bit of bite in his game, but he only chooses when to play with bite. It's very hot and cold with him. And my worry is that with Musty. Is he a hot and gold kind of player where you're not sure what you're going to expect from him week to week? He could be your second, third best winger in 1 week, and then the next week he's invisible. So it's hard for me to really say where he would be in the lineup, other than I think he's got the upside and the potential to be a top 6 guy for sure. And I think, he could play power play 1, absolutely, and he would be the setup man. And maybe he develops more of a shot and goal scoring ability playing on the opposite side of Johnny Gaudreau. That it could be a possibility. But if he's not getting those opportunities, can he still provide some depth scoring in a bottom 6 role? And that's where I kind of, if he can't, then those are the issues you're gonna run into with selecting him potentially in a late first rounder with a late first round pick.
Yeah, it feels like there's a weird logjam of players in this draft, because I feel like there are so many good players that kind of would go top 5 in any other year, that are then getting pushed to the next bracket and then the next bracket and the next bracket, So
Yeah.
it feels like will Musty be there when the Blue Jackets have their second pick of the draft? Almost definitely. But will other players who have also been pushed down the rankings be there? So I feel like once you get out of kind of the top 5, maybe the top 10, it's basically impossible to know who's still going to be available for the Blue Jackets. This is LA's first round pick, so it could be anywhere from 18 to all the way up to 32nd.
Yeah.
It's gonna be a weird one. I have no idea what to think the Blue Jackets are gonna do with it. Hope maybe we'll have a better idea in a couple of months. But Musty's definitely someone that's on my radar, that seems like a player that the Blue Jackets could treat as a project that, we think we can get more out of this guy than maybe another team.
Yeah. Well, I think he is the thing is he could be a possibility for Team USA at the World Juniors next year as well. That would be good exposure for him playing against that level of competition as well. So, it is a deep draft this year, like you said, and players just get pushed down. You look at Juraj Slafkovsky, who went first overall last year. I don't even know if he's top 5 this year. He may be number 5, but for me, I'm taking Fantilli, Leo Carlson, or Mishkov before Slafkovsky, that's for sure. But it's a deep draft, so definitely I think Musty will be available at the time around 18 to 32, where that potential second first rounder for the Columbus Blue Jackets could be. It's just if are they willing to I do get a little sense of Patrick Laine from him. His size, skilled player. He's got the tools to really be a difference maker offensively in the NHL. But it's just about piecing it all together and willing to work for it.
Yeah, for sure. And that's all I've got for you today. No new episode tomorrow. Monday we'll be back. We'll be breaking down this weekend's games and hopefully breaking down some fun. Blue Jackets play tomorrow against Florida and Sunday against Ottawa. So Monday we will discuss both of those games, and we'll also probably do a mailbag if I remember to ask for questions. So if you have questions for that, you can comment on this YouTube video. You can at me on Twitter at _Jacob Foster, JAKOBFORSTER. You can at the podcast at LO_Blue Jackets. If you have comments, questions, criticisms, you can email me at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Thank you all for listening. Thank you for making this your first listen of the day every day. Locked On Blue Jackets continues to be free and available on all podcast platforms. We're over on YouTube. Please hit subscribe if you haven't already. It helps me out. It helps you out. Everybody wins. And until Monday, make sure you stay locked on.